So, Alan, I was going through your article of how to oust your woke pastor, and ran across the section where you were talking about some good ministries that would be a good sign that your pastor was on the right track. And I noticed that you left out Pulpit and Pen and Protestia and Polemics Report.
I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
This is my convention. What is happening to it?
Defending against the modern-day downgrade as we head downhill at breakneck speed, speaking truth, exposing the lies. This is Polemics Report.
You know why you do it. You don't do it because you get paid well. You don't do it because men love you. You do it because you love men, and because more than that, you want to honor God.
From a location somewhere in the eastern Montana prairie, this is your host, J.D. Hall.
Hello, and you are listening to Polemics Report for October 12, 2021. This is your host, J.D. Hall. This is the program we hope will be glorifying to God, convicting to sinners, and edifying to the saints, a program with sincere questions and biblical answers. Thank you so much for listening in. If you have a sincere question and a biblical answer, I used to say, just email me, I'll answer it. Now I get so many emails, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to join us on Patreon. They're the ones that bring this program to you for free. We don't have a fairy who sprinkles, like spare change over the program. We have patrons who support us $5.95 a month to get access to the full program, not just the half truncated version you may be listening to on the Bible Thumping Wingnut RSS feed or your favorite podcatcher. You can listen to the entire program by giving us $5.95 a month. If you don't like that, then we refer to you as a freeloader and presume that you take no offense to that. Also, you get subscribed to the Insurgency by emailing Cheyenne@GideonKnox.com. You got to tell her, I just subscribed to Patreon. Please subscribe me to the Insurgency. That's $7 a month. That saves you $1 a month. What that is I have a news team that scours the internet for 50 different news sites a day through thousands of news links to find the ones that are most likely to be banned from social media. We circumnavigate big media's tech censors and send the links directly to your email where they can't do a lot. I don't want to test them. I don't want to say they can do nothing about it, but because they could just be like, you're no longer our customer. But it's harder for them to do something about. So, for example, you might have heard, and I brought in the studio with me David Morrill from Denver, Colorado. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm good.
You've seen the headlines of Southwest. 1,800 planes now are grounded, and that is apparently an air traffic control problem.
Weather.
It's on relatively clear days. That's an air traffic control problem. When in reality, I saw the article tonight. I saved it on LifeSite News. They're coming forward. The pilots are all coming forward to say, no, we're taking our vacation time because if you're going to force us to take the vaccine, we quit. BNSF Railroad, we have a story that we're working on yesterday, or it might be out by now. They're no longer servicing Montana. That's how Montana coal gets out to other countries to power the world. We're not powered by coal anymore because the hippies want windmills. But there are countries like India and China that rely on our coal. No, screw them. The world's going to go dark. Because I don't say screw them, but Joe Biden is, because the engineers, the conductors are just saying, no, we're not taking the vaccine to continue to work. So Atlas is shrugging. This is Atlas shrugged before our eyes. Who is John Galt? It's happening right before our eyes. But depending upon how the stories are told, you're probably not going to see it. So we make sure you see it. You get that with the insurgency. For $19.95 a month, you can join us at the Bulldogmatic Bible Study, where we study ecclesiology. The reason why we study ecclesiology is because polemics and discernment is for the local church. It's for the edification of the local church. It's not so that you can be Mr. Smarty Pants, you know everything. It is so that you can help equip, edify, and grow the church. And so we want every member of the every listener, supporter, whatever, of what we do. The insurgency, you can give via the insurgency. You can give via Substack by just Googling Substack Gideon Knox. You can give via Patreon. Anyone who gives, anyone who serves, anyone who volunteers, the dozens of you who help us have the furthest reaching polemics ministry in the world, we expect you to be happy, healthy, serving, giving, loving, sacrificial members of your local churches. All right? Because God didn't give you the gift of discernment just for you to tell everyone how awful they are. You tell everyone how awful they are in order to help them. That was blunt. Don't tell them how. You could hold some back, but explain to them the problems theologically that they have by using an open Bible through what we're teaching you about ecclesiology at our Bulldogmatic Study. And then for $49.95 a month, get a book sent to you in the mail every single month from our Book of the Month Club. And there's other levels of support for other patronage levels. That's typically how you can support us. Now, we have started a religious liberty fund at Fellowship Baptist Church because I am being sued by what's the right word? David, help me out. I don't want to scare quote transgender. I'm tired of doing that. A cross-dressing man. I called the cross-dressing man a man. According to him, he's suing me for transphobia. According to his attorney, he's suing me for libel. Chase Bank didn't want us to send us your money at first. So forget them. Send it directly to the church, right on their religious liberty fund. And that will go for my legal defense. When my legal defense is paid for, then we'll start supporting other pastors who are being persecuted for sharing their beliefs. That's how we stay afloat. Now, that's a lot of self-promotion, but what about the gospel? The gospel is the good news of God's salvation for sinners, people who do not deserve it. That's what the gospel is. That Jesus Christ died according to the scriptures. He was buried, and according to the scriptures, he rose again from the dead. And he died for people who do not deserve it, because grace is only given to those who don't deserve it. If you deserve it, it's no longer grace. It's an entirely different category known as justice. Justice is getting what you deserve. Grace is getting what you don't deserve. And so we have a religion not with a carrot on a stick, be good, get rewarded. That's every other religion on earth. We have a religion that says no matter what you've done or who you've offended, including God himself, he's provided the second person of the Holy Trinity to be conceived of the Holy Ghost, born of a virgin, to live a life you should have lived, and to die a death that, frankly, you kind of deserve. And so he took your punishment for you if only you would believe in him. So believe in him and repent of your sins and be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost as a first step of discipleship and following after him for a lifetime. I looked at a kid that I was fixing to baptize Sunday, and I said, would you take a bullet in the head for Christ? I mean, like, that was an actual question I asked a kid when we're standing in the back in the room aside the baptistry. You can hear people sing outside. Would you take a bullet in the head for Christ? I want to make sure before I dunk him that he understands this is a lifelong commitment. Jesus died for us. Will we die for him? That's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. And we don't serve an effeminate Jesus, but a masculine one. And that's part of what this program is about too, bringing the masculinity back to Christianity. David, On today's program, we have a couple guests. We have Brent Allen Winters, who is known as a common lawyer, who I met at Red Pill because when I walked by the booth, I heard someone shout, "That's the Baptist preacher." And I'm used to hearing at political events, "That's the Montana Gazette guy." And I heard that's the Baptist preacher because he had seen some things that I had been in. And then I think I bought some Bibles from him that he had translated. He's a thinker. He thinks about things. Do you know how rare it is to find a thinker who's actually thought stuff out? That's Mr. Winters. And he has helped me defeat Town Pump, or at least their intentions to ban me from their property. Why would an attorney do that for relatively free? Well, for totally free. I have with me a man who is not common. He may be a lawyer, but he's not common. His name is Brent Allen Winters. And he has been helping me with Town Pump. Here's the situation that, forgive me for recalling over and again. If you're listening to Jim's White program, I repeated some of this today. I went into a Town Pump in East Helena. I had a caravan of people behind me. I went into the restaurant. When I went, or the gas station, I bought a bag of chips and a pop. I noticed that there's a transvestite behind the counter. Ordinarily, I don't say anything. He was wearing, though, a pink and blue pin, which is the pro-life colors. I found that peculiar. I asked a question, making conversation, as normal people do, have a tendency to make conversation. What does your pin mean? He says it stands for trans pride. I said, well, God made you a man. Any type of pride is a sin, and you should repent of your sins and believe the gospel. By this point, he's finished putting my stuff into a bag. I'm finished giving him money. You're putting my card in the machine and typing in my debit card. We leave the store. An angry, rhinoceros-sized woman ran out after me, screaming imprecatory things. I'm going to hell. Jesus hates me. Mostly religious stuff. I try to get into my truck. She continues to yell. By this point, the women from Richland County and my caravan all have their hands on their hips, wondering if they're going to have to exercise the castle doctrine on this woman. I don't want to say that I stayed calm at that point. I did raise my voice in commensurate volume to hers so that she could hear me over the sound of her own screaming, asking her if she was, why she was so offended at science. Why are you so offended at objective truth? I just stated something that was true. Why are you mad at me? She kept saying he has a right to be gay. And I would say, I know. I'm not disagreeing with that. He has a right to be as weird as he wants to be, and I have a right to say that he's weird. What is even the controversy here? What's the problem? They come out of the store, not the tranny, the transvestite, but the someone working at the store who was not wearing any garb or insignia of the store. So it was hard to tell that they were an employee. This is the same woman who my wife was like, can you check me out? Because there was quite a line. And she said, no, I'm off the clock. So it was an off of the clock employee, apparently. She was videotaping it on the phone as though I am the freak show. The evangelical Christian is the freak show. She said, can you leave the property? I said, are you Town Pump? Are you with Town Pump? She said, yes. And I said, I'll leave as soon as my party is ready to go. I got a guy over here who's putting oil in his vehicle. I got another woman who's still filling her tank. As soon as they're gone, we're gone. We don't intend you any trouble. I heard them call the police 911. They want to they wanted to report the hate crime of transphobia, which is an interesting way of saying not a crime. And so I was between a rock and a hard place. If I stay, I could be guilty of a trespass order. If I go, it looks like I'm guilty of a crime. I left. I left as soon as my party was done. We left, but the police were not there yet. I saw them pull in though, and I pulled over and called the non-emergency line and explained my name, a brief incident, so they would know which one I was referring to. Like I didn't go into the details, but so that they would know which incident it was. And my address, where to find me. And then I called my attorney. My attorney got on to me vociferously for talking to the police. So I called them back and gave the number of my attorney to talk to. Then kind of that is the situation in the story. And then a few weeks later, I get a letter in the mail banning me from the location of Everytown Pump in Montana, which is a chain that is so large, it's difficult to drive in many portions of the state within a few hundred miles without finding and using a town pump. There aren't a lot of gas stations in between. When you see a sign in Montana that says last gas, stop and get gas. Okay. Like if you have half a tank, stop and get fuel. So, in the meantime, the letter sent to me banning me from the property under threat of criminal trespass doesn't say for what. And most of the time, those are reserved for shoplifters and people masturbating in the bathroom, perverts and so forth. And so it didn't say what it was for. I went immediately to my local prosecutor and my local sheriff. I explained to them it was for calling a man and telling him to repent and believe in Jesus, at which point both of them, who know me very well, were like, yeah, I can imagine that happening. And it's no big deal to them. And then stayed in touch with my own town pump because I know everyone who works there. I'm a regular customer. And that's when I decided to get Brent Allen Winters involved because he is a common lawyer. And in the meantime, I'm being sued by Adrian Jowert for $250,000. It's going to cost $100,000 to represent me. Here's the good news. God's going to provide all that money. If you'd like to give, you can give tax deductibly to the Religious Liberty Fund, Fellowship Baptist Church, 2181 West Holly Street. And all of that will go to defending me or other pastors who are in similar situations. David just put it up on the Vimeo screen. That's tax deductible in case you would like to give. You can also give in some non-tax deductible ways if you think 501c3s are of the devil. But I have Brent Allen Winters with me. He is a man that I deeply respect. I have not spoken to him enough to know that I agree with him on every subject. So there's a chance that I don't agree with him on every subject because I'm not positive for sure that I agree with me on every subject. So we'll just have to see. But Brent or Mr. Winters, whichever you prefer, thank you for joining us for this edition of Polemics Report. And you are on mute.
Brent. Yes, I'm off, I think, now. But yes, Brent's good enough. I like to say I don't like to call Paul Apostle Paul, because I don't see that the Bible stresses that. So if Paul's good for him, John's good for John, James is good for James, Brent's good for me, and thanks, though, for offering to say Mr. Winters. Well, this is great to be here, and I'm sure that you and I, if we talked long enough, we'd have to find a way to disagree. I talked to a Baptist. No, he wasn't a Baptist. He was a Presbyterian. a Presbyterian, but I suppose this could be applied to Baptists as well. I asked him, I said, if you got three Presbyterians, what do you got? And I was surprised. I thought he'd know the answer. The answer is, if you have three Presbyterians, you have three churches. Well, maybe that applies to Baptists too. I don't know. But if men don't disagree about things somewhere, there's something seriously wrong. Seriously wrong. So it is the great power of America that we've been the only country in the world. No one has ever done what we've done respecting the Bible. That's not a brag. It's just a fact. It's the providence of God. We're the only country that ever were comfortable with the idea every man had his own copy of the Bible, and he tried to figure out what it meant by what it said. Now, that can cause problems. But at the same, well, it did. But at the same, that's the problem that Rome says that we have. But at the same time, the apostle says, that's Paul, that's just Paul. He says, there must be divisions among you. There must be. And that word translated divisions is the word heresy. The heresy is a Greek word. And that doesn't mean there must be heresies among you. No. Yeah. That just means there must be, there must be disagreements. If there isn't disagreements, the truth will not be preserved. That's why God allows that disagreements. And by the way, our common law tradition is adversarial, not inquisitorial. All of the world, except the 5 major common law countries and a few countries connected to them, is under the law of the city, and it is not adversarial. They don't have trials in South America and Russia and Vietnam, as we used to say, and Sweden. They don't have trials. They have inquisitions. Oh, mild, sometimes not so mild, back to the thumb screws and attaching the electrodes to your private parts. That's inquisition. Go to the book of Acts. You can see when Paul got crosswise with, just like you did, same deal. You know, where somebody in the book of Acts, it was the Judaizers, the Jews that followed Paul around and some other people, and they'd cause trouble. And the same thing today. It's the Babylonian point of view that's following people around. And if they happen to see you say something they don't like, they cause trouble. By the way, you were talking a while ago about people accusing you of being a fundamentalist. And that always brings to mind Sam Sutherland. When Sam Sutherland comes to mind, then B.B. Warfield and Robert Dick Wilson and Gershom Machen come to mind. And the whole idea of fundamentalism comes to mind because you
just listed most of my heroes.
In the 1920s invented the word. Yeah. Well, they're the ones that said, we got to do something. They're Presbyterians, but they said, we got to do something. Well, what is it? Well, the church is losing its grip on the foundation of the Christian faith. And academic, educated men went to Europe to school and all. They said, we'll call it the fundus. We've got to reestablish the fundus. That's the Latin word for foundation. So they called themselves fundamentalists. That arose out of the controversy for the Bible. Well, that's always the controversy, no matter what ilk it may take. Either the Bible is final or it isn't. And that's the problem. Well, they said we're fundamentalist. That was
Can
Robert
I stop
Dick
you?
Wilson,
Can I stop
Gershom
you here for a second?
And, B.B. Warfield. Sure.
David, are you still there?
Yep.
Can you believe this guy was my attorney?
It looks like you had a competent and wise representation. You know?
The guy knows a thing or two.
Well, I
doesn't
guarantee he probably do a better job of defending you than you'd have done defending yourself. No offense.
Probably so. Sorry. Go ahead, Brent.
Well, I don't know where I was going. If you guide me a little bit, I just launched off on that fundamental. As you were talking a while ago, though, I took a few notes. Let me see if there's anything here. Oh, one thing I did notice that you had talked about, this came to mind because of what you were saying and the others. The battle in America can be reduced and characterized in many ways in its reduction, but to the common denominator, to the foundation of the battle is for the dictionary. The battle is for the dictionary, because when men lose the meanings of words, they lose their life, their liberties, and their property. And by the way, those three things, life, liberty, and property, stand and fall together. One goes down to the degree one goes down, the other two go down that same degree. You take a man's life, he has no liberty or property. You take his property, he doesn't have any life that has any quality to it. They're all together, and words are at the bottom of it all. And if we do not pay close attention to words and what they mean and the way God defines them. Now, just this last weekend, we were in Bonners Ferry, Idaho, and talking up there, and Peter Hammond was supposed to come, but he couldn't make it. So a fellow putting it on called me and said, "Say, Brent, you're going to come up here and listen to Peter Hammond, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm bringing some other people. We're going to hear Peter." I'd heard him before and met him, just an acquaintance, but I wanted to hear him. He said, "Well, Peter called and said he can't come because he's down in South Africa, and they're getting ready to get on an airplane, and they told him he had to get the jab or they weren't going to let him on. So he said, I can't come because I'm not getting the jab." He said, "Well, Brent, he's not coming. Will you say a few words?" I said, "Well, I'll say a few words. If you do one thing for me, you got to promise me this." He said, "What's that?" That's Warren Campbell. He's the pastor of the church up there. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Don't tell anybody that Peter's not coming, because if you tell them he's not coming, they may not come. But if you just keep quiet about it, maybe there'll be some people there by the time I get there." Well, there were a few, and I think there were a few other news outlets there. Redoubt News, I believe is the name of it.
Tim Ravendall. Tim Ravendall.
We talked about words.
Tim Ravendall is who you met.
Okay.
At Redoubt News.
All right. Well, nice fellows. They were friend, not foe. But we talked about, for instance, the word no.
Probably had a gun on his hip.
In the Older Testament, the Hebrew word yada. Oh, everybody up there had guns on their hips except me. I didn't have one, but I felt safe there with all the preachers standing in the pulpit with a gun on his hip. I took a picture of it just to send it to my 95-year-old father. I wanted to know how they were doing things out here.
We got lost.
Well, America's a different place, but we talked about the word no, and I noticed coming back.
We got lost at some point. I thought we were going to talk about the importance of words, and I was going to show off my dictionary, so I went to go get it.
Yeah.
And I say there's two books. There's two books that everybody needs in their gun safe. All right. There's dictionaries written before postmodernism. This one was written in 1953, which is a little bit late. But it has all of the words, and the other one is the Holy Bible, because paper is going to last. So I leave that dictionary out on my table in my office to remind me that words have significance and meaning and should not be mutable. They should not be movable. They should have meanings, and those meanings should stick.
Men, God governs with words. Somebody said, God governs with words, and is it any surprise that he has so made men so that they govern with words? And words are not some things, words are all things. There are other things we have to do in life, but let's just, John the Apostle, not the Apostle John, but John, wrote the book of 1 John, as you know, 5 chapters. And in that book, by my count, he uses 243 Greek root words, just 243. He was not educated, as the Bible tells us in Acts. He was an unlettered man. But that doesn't mean that he couldn't get his point across. Matter of fact, that's got to be one of the hardest hitting pieces of literature I ever read. No black and white with John. None. He's the one that read the books. He never talked about any gray areas. He says, "He who hath the Son hath life, and he who hath not the Son hath not life, and the wrath of God abides on him." Period. End of sentence. Well, it's either in or out, up or down, saint or ain't, heaven or hell with John. Well, the truth is there aren't any gray areas. The gray areas are just us being ignorant, stupid, or blind. Because with our Maker, there is no gray. It's either holy or unholy, clean or unclean. And it's up to us, and it's our job in life to discern the difference. And that's where the law comes into God's people. The law is the ability. It is the ability, one of the ways we can characterize it biblically, is the ability to discern men from women, heaven from hell, the law of the land from the law of the city, simple things like that apparently are lost to the buffoonery of
what is the law?
Idiots of the evil empire.
What
there
is
are
the
men
law?
And there are women.
What's the law of the land versus the law of the city? Can you explain that to us, ignorant folk?
Yeah, well, we're all ignorant, and we're all working at trying to get less ignorant as we go along.
I'm trying.
Now, the law of the land appears in writing. Yeah, me too. And the law of the land, I'm just a fellow that sits by myself. I'm not connected to much anybody. I hibernate. I don't get out that much. But I do sit by myself, and I spend my time with my nose in the Bible and in the cases of the common law. But the law of the land is in contradistinction to the law of the city. There are only two traditions of religion, law, and government among mankind, never have been any more than two, and there are only two now. And that is the law of the land and the law of the city. The law of the land has 2 volumes, and our Declaration of 76 cites them both. It says it this way. Our Declaration of 76 says the laws of nature, that's volume number 1, and the laws of nature's God, that's volume number 2. That phrase that expression arose from the Scottish Enlightenment. The Scottish Enlightenment arose from the Scottish Reformation. The Scottish Enlightenment came up with those 2 phrases. John Locke was a student of John Owen, the greatest Puritan, it is said, that ever lived, just John Locke. The phrases of John Locke in his second treatise of government, of course, Tom Jefferson imported over into the Declaration of 76. Jefferson said that John Locke was one of the 3 greatest mortals that ever lived. Well, Locke was a sharp cookie. Well, Locke took that phrase, the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. He understood it. He was a fan of the Scottish Enlightenment, and the Scottish Enlightenment overtook, like gangbusters, the English-speaking world. America is a product of the Scottish Enlightenment because those 2 volumes, the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God, are the foundation. We're back to the fundus here. We're back to fundamentalism. That's the foundation of our laws. Americans declared, we have declared it. And those 2 volumes, the laws of nature, is the law lex non scripta, says William Blackstone in his commentaries on the laws of England, written about the time our country started. Well, 1765, it was his lectures put to writing. And he cites and he points out that the laws of nature is the law unwritten. It is our observations of relationships. Law is all about relationships according to God. According to the law of the city, law is about the subject. If you go to the Bible, you'll discover that law is defined according to relationships. Fundamental case in point, what folk call the 10 Commandments. They aren't really the 10 Commandments. They're the 10 davarim, the 10 arranged words. There are 10 standards. There are 10 results. Only God has jurisdiction to declare the result of right and wrong. He has given us the jurisdiction of process. Well, the law of the land is the laws of nature. That's another name for it, the laws of nature. And the laws of nature are unwritten, and we observe these relationships between men and men, men and things, and things and things. And we say, well, this is the way it works. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's the law of nature. We've observed it. It always works. What goes up must come down. That's the law of gravity. We've observed it and we measure it. There are also the laws of falling objects with gravity. We've gotten very precise about this. I used to range around over the Hickey Hills, we call them, were nearby where we grew up. I grew up over on the north side. Can I interrupt you? Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm
I
trying
want you to, because I need a breather.
John Locke, I understand everything that you're talking about in terms of the laws of nature and of nature's God. I believe in natural law, the existence of natural law, and the laws of nature's God. And we would define that in our confession of faith as general revelation versus natural revelation. Okay. But I'm the type of guy that I hear something, I go to Amazon and I try to buy it. All right. So were you being literal when you're saying that he came out with two literal treatises, one on the laws of nature and one on the laws of God? Or were these ideas compounded? Like were these ideas together for Locke? Or did he actually write two different treatises?
The Scottish the Scottish Reformation established in that country, of course, among those people, the authority of the Bible. By the way, the Bible is the laws of nature's God. The Bible,
Right.
the Lex
Absolutely.
Scripta,
Absolutely.
Blackstone says.
It's
Yeah.
sure.
Well, then out of the Reformation, then out of the Reformation, these Scotsmen begin looking around and saying, wait a minute, the Bible doesn't list every law that we deal with here. We have we plant in the spring and we harvest in the fall, or we starve to death. That's a law, isn't it? Well, of course it is. The Bible mentions some of these, of course. The law of the harvest is part of the Bible. Whatsoever a man sows, that also shall he reap. There's another law. You can't sow corn and get barley. That's a law. That's the way it works. Well, they began to look into that, and the Scottish Enlightenment overtook, with those two volumes, overtook the English-speaking world. Now, there are a lot of things about the Scottish Enlightenment and that went awry.
I'm still trying to clarify.
But I understand.
I'm still trying to clarify. When you say those two volumes, do you mean two different volumes that came off the printing press, or do you mean two different classifications?
Thank you. Classifications. I use the word volume because it's convenient. Because the first volume, The Laws of Nature, is unwritten. So you can't really put your hands on it. It's our observations that we learn about our environment around us and things and relationships. The second volume is written. So as you'd said, general revelation, which goes out to all men. Look unto me and be ye saved, says the old book. Look unto me, Isaiah, look unto me and be ye saved, all the ends of the earth. That's general revelation. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. All men know. Jumping off from that, Paul says all men know. Why? General revelation. But then there's that specific and particular revelation that Spurgeon says strikes between the joints of the harness with the specific call to God's man, that kind of thing. So, there are two volumes, and those two volumes are our fundamental law. And our common law, to get back to it, the law of the land is, in contrast to its ever great antagonist, ever great and ever present since the founding of the city of Babylon forward, the law of the city. Every country in the world is governed by the law of the city except the 5 major common law countries and the ones attached to them. There is the common law is the law of the land. That's another name for it. Magna Carta, it first appears in Magna Carta, lex terra, Magna Carta. No man's life, liberty, or property shall be taken except by the law of the land. Now, our Supreme Court of the United States has observed, and rightly observed, that phrase, law of the land, is another phrase for our common law. But more than that, our common law is about process. It's not about the result. Our common law is a law of process. We call it due process. Our Northwest Ordinance of 1787 for the governance of the territories north and west of the Ohio River says at the beginning the course of our common law. See, our common law is not thou shalt not covet, lie, steal, commit adultery, or murder. No, those are the end result standards. And only God has jurisdiction to declare the end result standards. We don't have that jurisdiction. He says to us, what I want you to do is make sure the proper process is followed. Remember, the judgment is mine, he says. What's my job? The process. That's common law. Common law is the way we do things, not what we do so much, but stresses the way we do it. The law of the city is just the opposite. The law of the city stresses the result. We must reach the result that the state, the government, the powers that be say we have to reach. We have to. You see, where it's result-oriented, like the law of the city, all the rest of the world, the means justifies the ends. I mean, if the result is all that really matters, then we just got to get this result, and it doesn't make any difference how we do it. That is why they torture people in all those countries.
So I'm getting distracted.
Law. Go to the book of Acts. That's the law of the city.
I'm getting distracted because I'm trying to find books on Amazon to order to differentiate between the law of the land and the law of the city. And I'm not finding a lot. Are these terms that maybe you would use that other people would not use? Or the reason, and by the way, David can fill you in. David, why don't you take a moment and fill him in about why the word city sets us off so much?
This has kind of been an issue because we run into some theologians. You might have heard of, I don't know if you've heard of Tim Keller. He's a Presbyterian pastor in New York, and he is all about the city, even to the point where claiming that the city versus rural areas of the country has some sort of theological significance. He likes to get on social media every once in a while and talk about how wonderful the city is and how that's really the core of God's evangelical plan going forward as the people in the city. And so it gets under Jordan's skin a little bit, I think. This Tim Keller's obsession with the city to the detriment of rural places, and Jordan would be on the opposite side. And I would be, even as someone who lives in the suburbs of Denver, would still be out more on the rural side rather than the city, or at least to the point where I would say that there's nothing especially significant about the city in terms of a special need to reach it versus rural areas.
Well, I would also add, in the city, I don't see respect that I see in the country for natural law. I just don't. And I don't know if that's part of what Brent is talking about or not, but like the first thing that happened when I took my sons to Colorado the other day was we were treated profanely in traffic in a way that would not have happened where we currently live. There seemed to have been less respect for one another, less respect for life, less respect for, I don't know. It seemed to me that, like, for example, I've banned my children from ever moving to the city. I've made that decision as the patriarch of my family. Move wherever you want. I don't care if it's to Alaska. Don't move to the city. Like, I despise it. And so I find your use of the term to be intriguing, to say the least.
Well, there is no political division in the history of mankind except the political division between the law of the land and the law of the city and the outlying areas. It is a biblical concept from cover to cover and lid to lid of the Bible. The land is the theme of the Bible. And at the end of that book we call the Bible, every city on the faces of the land will be destroyed. Cities are not God's approved way of living. That's why we have Genesis chapter 11. I've lived in the city, and there are things we do in the city. And Paul, the apostle, Paul, went to the city, and he worked there. But that's not what God intended for man. And I'm old enough now, I don't hesitate to say it. We're watching now in America the greatest internal migration we've ever seen in the history of our country from the cities to the rural areas. And it's happening all over the country. And that's not insignificant. That's all about the Bible.
I'm taking my video off.
480 AD wrote.
I'm taking my video off occasionally because I'm eating my supper, but what they would say when listen, I point out the first city builder was Cain, who was a murderer. The next one was Nimrod, who was famous for building cities. Then we have Babel, We have Sodom. We have Nineveh. The city is where the prophets went to get stoned. Jesus went to the city. He was a country boy. He grew up in a no stoplight hillside town named Nazareth. They killed him when he went to the city. John the Baptist, they took his head.
And Abraham.
In the city. So what they would say, answer this for me. They would say, well, but there's a new city coming, which is the New Jerusalem. And so what Keller would argue is we are moving from the village, which is low civilization. This is not God's will to live in the garden. I think he was attacking the actual garden. We shouldn't be living in a garden. We should be moving to the city. David, find that exact tweet real quick and pull it up for Brent, if you would.
Well, he's got a bajillion tweets about the city. So which one are you talking about?
The last one I was screaming at him about.
All right, let me look. So it says human history starts in a garden, Genesis, but ends in the city, Revelation. That means the city is an intrinsically positive social form filled with images of God, with a checkered past and a bright, beautiful, restored future.
That's incredible. Augustine in the 4th century contrasted the city of man and the city of God, and they're antagonistic. Though that was his point of view. Of course, he's looking at the Bible, trying to figure things out. And of course, he said Rome was the city of God. That was where he went wrong. Rome's the city of man, filled with prostitution and graft, and always has been and remains that way yet today. It was really bad in his day. But no, the God that commanded us. Let's go back to the beginning. The problem, as I see it, we continually abandon the foundations. When I was a young fella in high school, the most famous football coach in the world was Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi was the coach of the Green Bay Packers, and they won 3 world championships. And the story goes that every year when they went to training off season, he got them all to sit down in front of him, all the rookies and all the veterans of the Green Bay Packers. And Vince Lombardi held up a football and he said, "This, gentlemen, is a football." And he'd say, "We're not going to get past the fundamentals. We're just going to get better and better and better at the fundamentals." And any common lawyer, and every lawyer in America ought to be a common lawyer. And there's only 2 kinds of lawyers in the world. That's common lawyers. That's lawyers of the common law countries. And there's civil lawyers, and that's lawyers of all other countries, including the priesthood of Rome, because the canon law of the Church of Rome is the code of Justinian of the Roman Empire, put to an ecclesiastic purpose. And all of that law says that the state is the final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal. What do we call that? We call that godhood. And by the way, when you see the word God in the Bible, just substitute the word lawgiver, both testaments, because the words in both testaments, the Hebrew word El or Elohim in the plural and the New Testament word Theos, both of those mean lawgiver. That means final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal. That's godhood, friends, and that's the most powerful authority in creation.
Brent, you are an attorney, is that right? In the state of Illinois, you are registered as an attorney in Illinois.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And
have you specialized then in the city and in the law of the city? When your heart is in the city, the law of the land, or how does that work?
What I've gravitated toward is to be a comparative lawyer. There are different. Comparative law is the comparing and the contrasting of the law of the land and the law of the city. It was required course in our law schools, because you cannot understand our law, our common law, unless it is compared and contrasted with this great antagonist, the law of the city, the civil law of Rome. When that Rome is the highest expression of Babylonian law, and that's the code of the Emperor Justinian. He put it all together at his behest. His legal beagles went back to Babylon and through the Roman Church, and every rescript of every emperor and every pope was brought together. And then they said, this is listen to this. They said, this is the Logos. The Logos. And ever since then, and the Pope of Rome, about the 10th century, did the same thing. That has been the attempted replacement of the true Logos. In the beginning, it was, let's say, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Logos, see? And the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. And they said, well, this is the Logos. This is elegant law. This is perfect. And the distinctions between our common law, our law of the land, and the result-oriented law of the city, which results in torture. All the communist states are under the Code of Justinian in its various forms. The French Code, Vietnam, for instance, is under the French Code, the French form called the Code of Napoleon, and then the German Code, the Code of Bismarck. Nazism was enabled by the Code of Bismarck. That's our world, and because that is ignored, the uniformity is the push of the evil empire. Oh, we can have the same. We can have boys and girls the same, men and women are the same. Everything's uniform. All religions are the same because they're all going to the same place. Heaven and hell. There is no hell.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you a question. If we could segue back to Town Pump. What did you share any thoughts that you have about that may be lingering, and why did you decide to help me with that?
Well, you asked, and I wanted to do something. We didn't do a lot. Frankly, all a lawyer can do is help somebody tell their story to the right people. That's all a lawyer can do. Even if he goes to court, the object is examination, cross-examination. You're trying to help folk tell the story. But in this case, if a guy can talk and you can talk, and if he can write and you can write, it was very easy for me because you wrote down the facts and you laid out arguments, and all you needed me to do was just be the guy who has the reputation for knowing something because he passed a bar exam someplace, and tell your story. That's what we did. We told your story. And the best story in court, the best story almost always wins. If you can tell a story that people like, you'll probably win to the jury, to the judge, whoever it is. And that's true in life as well.
Brent,
and that's why the Bible is so popular, because it doesn't just lay out statutes, commandments, and judgments. Go ahead.
Credit to God, and I still have this Jowert fight in front of me, which makes this Town Pumps fight look like small by comparison. But by God's grace, you and I and God, mostly God, all God, beat a massive organization that makes $600 million a year, mostly on gambling and a little bit on gasoline. We beat them.
The power of knowing a little bit about.
I mean, that's praiseworthy.
We're a nation, not of men, but of law. Yes, it is. And God says the Christian point of view. And by the way, Jordan, the government and the law of the dominant religious institutions of a country will be the fundamental government and law of that country. The government and law of the dominant religious institutions of a country will always be the government and law of that country. And that's why America is different, because the dominant religious institutions of America, when it started especially.
Are you a Christian nationalist?
Were salient.
Are you a Christian nationalist?
I'd have to ask you to define what you mean when you say that, and then I can tell you, but I wouldn't know for sure, because I'm afraid I don't understand. I mean, I can listen to those words.
America is designed. America is
designed. But what do you mean when you say that?
America is designed to be a Christian nation and should remain so, or should become so.
Well, no question. The Constitution of the United States is intensely Christian, intensely. People say, well, doesn't even mention God. Listen, you can mention God all you want or not mention him all you want. But if you do what he says, that's what he's interested in. Oh, if you talk about him, that's great. But don't get caught up in that argument that says, well, the Constitution doesn't even mention God. Listen, the way you proclaim God is knowing his will and living it. And that's what the Constitution of the United States presents fundamentally is God, is the Bible's view, the law of the land's view of mankind. He is a sinner.
Last question.
And, the government, the common law government has...
Second to last question for you, and I'm going to give the last question to David, actually. Second to last question for you. Do you think that we won that legal ordeal because they knew that they would lose? Or do you think they just gave it up because it wasn't worth the hassle? I don't believe they did it because it was right. I'm too pessimistic to believe that.
No. They never see the light till they feel the heat. That's the nature of the godless and the useful idiots of the evil empire. Anyone who would brook perversion of men and women who do and will abuse our children and our wives and our daughters. They will. That's what they're out to do. That's what they want. Read their literature. This is not child's play. Ignore it and it goes away. No, it doesn't go away. They must have you to march in their parades with them. And if you don't march in their parades with them, and the reason for that is because God does not approve of them. So they must have they got to have somebody to approve of. And if you just stand fast, the Bible doesn't say attack. The Declaration of 76 doesn't even mention saber rattling. It just says, no, here's what we're doing, and we ain't budging. That's it. And that's what the Bible says to do. Just stand fast and don't budge. And they want you to say, each to his own. Don't say that. That's what they want. If they can get you to say that, they'll get you to do what they want. That's the weakness of humanity. The Bible says don't.
But when
that.
we sent that letter,
says if you don't say something,
when we sent our letters, we made it clear that we were not backing off of our beliefs, and I'm proud of that, and I'm thankful for that.
Stand fast, and no, I agree with you. I think that it was for reasons of money. They're not into being Sunday school superintendents over there, I don't think, with all the, as you mentioned, $600 million in the gambling. That's not what they're out to get. They're incorporated. And it is the object of a corporation to make money for the shareholders, and anything else they do is unlawful according to our courts. That's all it's about. Back to you.
David, I'm going to give you the last question to a common lawyer, to Brent Allen Winters, in case you happen to have one.
Well, I was going to ask. So I've been trying to make the case to anybody that'll listen that the recent push by everybody, for people that are pro forced vaccination, they're pro COVID forever, they're pro masking, pro the government dictating to individuals what they should be doing with their own health decisions. I've been trying to make the case, and they'll say something like this: well, you're only concerned about your individual rights. You're only concerned about yourself. And they couch individual rights as being selfish. I've been trying to make the case that when you stand up for your individual rights, you're loving your neighbor, because in an egalitarian society, in a society where we're equal under the law, standing up for your rights also means that you're standing up for everybody else's rights as well. How does that fit into your framework? What do you think about that?
That's exactly correct. To quote Blackstone again, public good and public freedom only consist of a lot of individual rights. And when there is no individual right, there is no public good and there is no public freedom. But I'm to the point that I'm not willing to argue much about with this crowd anymore. Things have gotten very bad. And it seems to me that Well, they're not going to listen. Their brains aren't engaged. Their eyes are blinded. They don't want to. They have no desire for the truth. They want to go along with the prevailing easy. It comes down to the difference between conviction. Lot, as you know, Lot, in Genesis 19, he was vexed. He was righteous, the Bible says. In many places, or a few places, it says he was a righteous man. But he was willing to brook the sodomy that was rife around him, and he lost everything. And that's the way I see most Americans, and I see it as a great impetus to me to not be that way. I'm trying not to, and I pray to God that he'll empower me at the right moments to not be like Lot. That's where we are, though. There's a difference between conviction and preference. Lot had preferences. A lot of folk have preferences, and he said very clearly and laid it out in no uncertain terms that the First Amendment of our Constitution of the United States, the religion clauses, do not protect preferences. They protect convictions. What's a conviction, according to the Supreme Court? And I think they got this one right. Is that which will not change. They'll put a gun to your head. I'm going to kill you. Well, you do what you got to do, but no, I'm not going to say what you want me to say. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. That's what a conviction is, according to Justice, I believe it was Black. Well, Black and Douglas, the Bobbsey twins, they always seemed to write together. That was back in 1974. But if you want your rights and you want to invoke our law, then it takes conviction. And you have to be able to show that it's not a preference and that you won't change for nothing. Now, when you stop to consider that, that's a lot. That's very much a lot. Remember the old story about Jack Benny? Some of you remember who Jack Benny is. And the joke with Jack Benny was, and he made a living on this joke, that he was so tight that he squeaked when he walked, tighter than tree bark. He had a lot of money, but he wouldn't spend any of it. And that was the joke that went with everything he did. And the story goes, he was walking one warm evening outside of his house, and a man jumped out of the bushes with a pistol and put it up on his head, and had the trigger cocked and said, "Your money or your life, your money or your life." And Jack didn't do anything, didn't say anything. And he kept screaming, "Your money or your life." And finally, Jack Benny said, "I'm thinking it over." He had to stop and think it over. Well, he had a pretty deep conviction, according to his show business personality, about money. And money was more important to him than his own life. That was the point of the story. Well, that's the kind of conviction that we are to have with the standards of God. God governs by words. He has given us his words. They are an expression of his will. And the will of whoever people take to be the sovereign is always law. The will of whoever a person takes to be the sovereign is law. The Bible is the expression of the will of the sovereign of all creation. That is his law. What is your conviction? To be convicted about his law is to be convicted about him. To want to learn about his will is to learn about him. You want to know who he is? You learn what he wants. That's his law. Don't be afraid of the word law. It's not a legalistic word. The most encompassing word in the Older Testament of law, for law, is Torah. Torah. You've heard it. Well, a few times it appears in the verb form. And when it appears in the verb form, its meaning is the way, the roadway pointed out with the index finger. That's not a legalistic word. Jesus Christ said, John 14:6, "I am the way." He is referring to Torah. What he's saying is this is not a list of laws as such. It is a course. Our common law is a course. It is due process. It is not result-oriented. We're not to worry about the result. That's God's business. Our job as his creatures, delegated responsibility, is to follow the law of the land, due process, the law of the land, as opposed to the law of the city. And yes, the great division among mankind, we see it clearly in America today, is the difference between the rural areas and the city. And it all comes back to Genesis chapter 11, back to Adam. When God created him, he said, "Be fruitful and scatter." scatter. That's the most fundamental part of our covenant, our trust settlement. And it's all about land, all of it. Jesus Christ came to redeem his people, that they would take care of his land according to his terms all over the world. Not just the land of Israel. Get that out of your head. No, all this land is his, and it's all precious to him. So
global
precious that if you pollute
manifest
it by not following his courses of process, if you don't follow it, the land will vomit you out. And we find that with Adam and Eve and right on through the Bible. Back to you, Jordan.
Yeah. A global manifest destiny. I am actually just kind of surprised at how much we have in common, which is quite a bit. David, thank you so much for hosting or co-hosting our program.
Go ahead, Brent.
Go ahead, Brent.
Thank you, David. I was going to say, and I've never been a Baptist.
What are you, a Presbyterian?
No, I'm not a Presbyterian. Although I'm sympathetic to the Westminster Confession, I've gotten to know it pretty well. But I grew up in a little church back near Terre Haute, Indiana, and I'm glad I did.
Please don't say something heretical. You're gonna ruin a whole program. We're gonna have to cut up. You're not a Mormon, right? No, you're not a Jehovah's Witnesses. You're not.
No,
you're a Bible Baptist. You're a community Christian fellowship church guy.
I suppose you could call it that. We have church every Sunday, Jordan, on the internet.
Well, we always encourage people to gather in person, so we don't have everything in common, but we do have a lot in common, and we appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
It's like drinking out of a fire hose, to be honest with you. It's going to take me a while to digest, but thank you so much. And please continue to pray for that gray bill thing too. That guy is still coming after me hard, and I'm going after him as hard as I can back. And so it feels like a daily fight, because I honestly, I know that it is. We only have so much time, and we're going to fight them as hard as we can fight them.
Yep.
We're not going to go down easy. We're not going to go down. Let me put it that way. We're not going to go down. He's going to go down, and God's going to win this battle. And the best advice that people have given me is, Jordan, this is not your battle. This is the Lord's battle, and he will fight it. And I need to remember that every single night that I go to sleep, that this is the Lord's battle. But Brent, thank you so much for representing me in this matter. We would be one of the biggest corporations in the state of Montana, and honestly, one of the biggest in the country, all because an attorney in Illinois decided to get involved where it was none of his business. So thank you, Brent Allen Winters, for your help. Thank you, David Morrill. And David, I'm sure that you can figure out what to do with this video and audio for our patrons and for our non-patrons, our patrons and our freeloaders. Thank you so much for listening to Polemics Report. God bless you, and talk to you later. Until then, as always, Semper Reformanda.